What up YouTube, it's Miserate's Company. In today's video, we are going to be showcasing our brand new single target max damage revamped build. Because like I said in a previous video, I was wrong about some of the essences for the Blood Knight, which I am man enough to own my mistake. But I'm also a good enough content creator to come out with a better build than the first one I came out with. So this is our max damage completely revamped, good for really any amount of resonance. Obviously higher resonance content creators that have done a similar build are going to be doing tons more damage, and I would anticipate that. But this build really is good for any and all classes. And like I said, this build is going to be similar to what other people have shown you. But if you haven't seen it, the biggest difference is going to be the set pieces that I recommend for you, because my goal is to make a build that's good for really all things Diablo Immortal when it comes to the Blood Knight. I personally don't like switching my set pieces a bunch of times. So this new set piece for this build will be good for any and all builds for the Blood Knight. So without further ado, let's get straight to it. This build is definitely different than, like I said, than the ones that I have done in the past. It's going to be using a couple of different skills that I did not previously have active at the time of my previous single target build. And shout out to Habanis. I hope I'm saying his name right. Dear God, if I'm not, I'm so sorry. But he actually is the one that motivated me to recreate my builds, because honestly, his was just that good. So this is very similar to his, minus the set pieces that I'm going to recommend. But I will put a link to his channel in the description of this video, because he does have two different videos, at least at the time of this recording, that are basically the same legendary essences. So I do want to shout him out for that, but I am recommending a different set gear. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and go straight to it. Now, again, the first thing we're going to do is summon the little mini boss, and you're going to notice my stance is in defensive form. As soon as he becomes active, I'm going to switch that to the offensive one, and then just start doing all the damage. Now, the biggest thing here is that I do get almost full uptime on one of our newer skills here, Shroud of Night, which helps me do even more single target damage. And I am going to want to be doing as much single target main attack damage as I can while still maintaining the fire on him. And then we are using Shadow's Edge, which means we do have to be aware of where we are. But as you can see, we're able to keep that uptime pretty good. Almost 100% uptime on our new Shroud of Night. So you can see it falls off here. We'll go ahead and watch it. So we're at 9 seconds, 8 seconds. Well, we'll go ahead and kill these guys. Hey there. 4, 3, and right around 2 seconds, at the top of the 2-second mark is when it fell off. So you have about 2 seconds of delay between being able to pop this again. So the rest of the build is pretty straightforward, guys. We're going to teleport over to Westmarch so I can show you the full breakdown. And yeah, I'm really excited about this build. It feels very crisp and clean to use. One of the biggest downfalls, though, is the lack of mobility. But again, in a raid setting, you shouldn't need that much mobility. And we're going to go ahead and jump into the build right now. All right, so here we are at the armory. Now, the skills we're using is Shadow's Edge for the main attack. We're using Whirling Strike, Siphon Blood, Swarm of Bats, and Shroud of Night, again, with almost 100% uptime. The headpiece, we're using the Siphon Blood is no longer channeled and now moves with you, dealing damage and draining the life of nearby enemies. Siphon Blood damage increased by 6%. Again, the last line of all of these are going to be due to my Essence Mastery being at level 2. It'll obviously increase the higher you get, up to a max of 4. The shoulders, we're using a new one, so Cloud of Bats. Swarm of Bats now engulfs you, and a cloud of bats continually damage to nearby enemies. Swarm of Bats damage increased by 6%. This actually lasts longer, does less damage, but it's less damage over a longer amount of time, equaling more damage in total compared to the one that turns you into the Cloud of Bats that also increases your movement speed. So yeah, that's why we're using this one. For the first main hand, we're using Whirling Strike, now Combust, using causing enemies to burn. Second main hand is when Siphon Blood damages the same enemy 3 times, it causes them to hemorrhage, dealing 4,915 additional damage. Damage increased by 30%. Chest piece is Mark for Death. Shroud of Night now empowers you and nearby allies, causing your primary attacks to mark enemies for death. The mark explode upon reaching 5 stacks, dealing damage to the marked enemy. Damage increased by 6%. And then for the legs, we are doing the Swarm of Bats poisons, because again, continual damage is going to be great for this build. For the 2 offhands, we're using basically the only 2 that buff Shadow's Edge. The first one is the most important, which is Shadow's Edge now marks enemies, causing them to erupt for 22,011 additional damage when reaching 4 marks. Damage increased by 30%. Last but not least is the Shadow's Edge that when it hits, it ricochets 2 additional blades out randomly, targeting nearby enemies. Now, The biggest thing with this build is that it has zero mobility, but it is all focused around auto attacking as much as you can. So since the shoulders are no longer turning us into the cloud of bats, and the Siphon Blood is basically doing it on its own, and then this Shroud of Night is just a buff in general, 3 of our abilities are going to allow us to continually use our main attack here, which is Shadow's Edge. The biggest thing I want to put emphasis on is that you do want to make sure you are in melee range for Shadow's Edge, because even when you go to a distance, you can see the damage fall off is very significant. And it's not a massive range that the pure Shadow Energy Blade will do that 22k, and you can sort of see in a little bit in the animation, but you really want to be on top of the target in order to get the higher damage. I just really want to bring attention to that. Now for the set pieces, we're using 2-piece Vithus, so we can increase the duration of both our bats as well as Shroud of Night. Helps us keep a higher uptime, as well as, actually now that I realize it, Siphon of Blood. Then we're using a 2-piece Banquet of the Eyes. This is the biggest difference compared to other people's builds. I do think Banquet of the Eyes still gives you enough profit to make this worthwhile. So this is damage dealt to enemies suffering from your continual damage, effects increased by 15%. Because we have the poison bats and the burn from our whirling strike, you're basically going to be guaranteeing yourself 50% increased damage at all times, which is why I highly recommend the 2-piece, but I was wrong on the 4-piece, which I did cover in a different video. Instead of running a 4-piece Banquet of the Eyes, I would actually recommend running an additional 2-piece Grace of the Flagellants. Reason being is all continual damage, channel damage, and persistent ground damage increased by 15%. So continual damage again, burn, and the poison is going to benefit us, and that's what we're going after in this build. So a lot of auto attacking or main primary attacking, and then all of your abilities allow you to continue primary attacking. But the biggest thing that will make the biggest difference for you in this build is when you go away from the melee range of your primary attack. You're going to lose 7k damage just for taking a couple steps away. So make sure you don't do that and stay as close as you can to the enemies, and you're going to be noticing a great deal amount of damage. Again, shout out to Habanis. I hope I'm saying his name right. Shout out to him on YouTube. I did see both of his build videos about this build, but I did change the set pieces, like I said, which is just personal preference. He could very well, he's a much larger whale than I am, so he very well could be doing more damage on his own, but this is where I think it makes a little bit more sense to do 2-piece Banquet instead of the 4-piece Grace. I could be wrong. This is my personal preference. Really, you can't go wrong with many of the set bonuses for the Blood Knights, and I have said this on several videos, but I do just want to reiterate this. I am not saying he is wrong. I'm just saying this is my preferred preference. Until next time, guys, lock it in.